Welcome to Husband Talking. Explore riveting tales of infidelity with us. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin.
On his drive home, John couldn't wipe the smile off his face. The promotion news had come earlier than expected, catching him by surprise that very morning when Mark walked into his office with the announcement. The top guys were impressed with how you managed the European issue, John, and they see no reason to delay. So, let me be the first to congratulate you as the new vice president for Western Europe sales, Mark had said. John, still in disbelief, thanked him and spent nearly an hour going over the new perks and responsibilities. After that, John was simply too euphoric to stay in his office a moment longer. He called Grace in and gave her the news. "Grace, I hope you won't mind changing jobs," he said, watching with amusement as her face fell. "John, are you replacing me?" She looked genuinely wounded. "Not at all, Grace. You know I couldn't get a damn thing done without you. It's just that you'll have to accustom yourself to working for the vice president for Western Europe sales. Think you can handle that?" Grace looked blank, then squealed with joy and gave John a big hug. She was a competent, rather stout middle-aged woman, a good 10 years older than John, but she'd worked for him practically since his first days at Adler Pharmaceuticals, and they were genuinely fond of one another. She and her husband had advised John and Emily on the best school districts when they were planning to buy a house. John had helped Grace's oldest son find an internship at Benson after his freshman year of college. Grace babbled away happily, asking John a million questions about the new job. When he finally could get a word in edgewise, he said, "I'm gonna ask you to hold the fort for today, okay? I've just got to get home and give Emily the news." They hugged again, and John headed for the parking lot. Champagne, he thought. Champagne and an afternoon in bed. It was July, so Emily's summer vacation from teaching was in full swing, and both Oliver and Lucas were at day camp until nearly 4:30, so there'd be plenty of time. John banged the steering wheel rhythmically, singing along with the Rolling Stones in a loud, not terribly pleasant baritone. No need to stop for champagne. He knew there was a bottle in the fridge, unopened since their 12th anniversary about 2 months earlier. He could hardly wait to burst in with his news, grab Emily, and carry her upstairs to the bedroom. But just as John swung the car onto Cedar Lane, he could see Emily's Toyota headed down the street in the opposite direction, too far away for him to catch up to her without speeding dangerously down the quiet residential street. He grabbed his phone and called her cell, but it seemed to be turned off. Sighing to himself, John parked in the garage and headed inside. Maybe she'd just gone to do the grocery shopping or run some errands. Perhaps they'd still have a couple of hours later in the afternoon. He ran upstairs and got out of his business clothes, coming back downstairs in shorts and a t-shirt. Making himself a quick sandwich and grabbing a beer, he wandered out toward the backyard patio. But as he passed the study, he noticed that Emily had left the computer on. Out of pure random curiosity, he went over to see what she'd been doing. Her email was open, but it wasn't her school account. Instead, it was a Gmail account he knew nothing about, and her username was Bella1978, using her middle name and birth year. Why did she have a second email account? He glanced at the sent folder, seeing only 2 names: her sister Rachel out in Denver and an unfamiliar one, rjones@mail.com. There were about 8 messages to that address, including her most recently sent one. John clicked it open. "Oh my God. Your message made my heart jump. I can't risk Sunday, no telling what John might be doing. Let's meet there Tuesday at 10. Can't wait, love." John sat back in shock, staring at the screen. What the hell? His lunch forgotten, John grimly settled down to dig through Emily's email and do some digging on the web. It took an hour before he had the full picture. Matthew White was an educational consultant who had spent 2 weeks at Emily's school in late May, leading professional development workshops with the teachers. The picture on his webpage showed a good-looking guy who appeared to be in his late 30s, a couple of years older than John and Emily. He was married with several kids and lived over in Linden Grove, past the airport to the east of Brookhaven, about 20 miles from John and Emily's house in Mapleton. From what John could tell, White had set his sights on Emily during the workshops and pursued her since. Their exchanged messages had begun cautiously but then become increasingly open and passionate. White wrote 2 weeks earlier that kissing you was the most erotic experience of my entire life. I carry around on my lips the indelible memory of you. They'd met alone at least 3 times, and it was clear that while White hadn't screwed her yet, he was getting close. His most recent message to Emily had read, "My beautiful Elle, I have never seen or touched such gorgeous breasts in my life. You are a goddess. We need more time. I burn to be with you completely at last. Can you get away Sunday to the usual place? You're Matthew." The only person that Emily had apparently confided in about her affair, not surprisingly, was her big sister Rachel. Also not surprisingly, Rachel was horrified and kept trying to talk her out of it. A week earlier, she'd written, "Are you out of your mind? Remember what happened to my friend Laura? How her husband found out and threw her out of the house. Did you know she's living in a tiny apartment and only gets to see her kids twice a week? Is screwing some handsome stranger a few times going to be worth it if John finds out?" There were 3 or 4 other messages like that from Rachel, all along the same lines. In one, she wrote, "John loves you, Elle, and he makes a good living and is a fantastic father to Oliver and Lucas. You told me yourself that you couldn't imagine being married to a better man, and that you love him now even more than you did when you guys got married. So what the hell are you doing?" It seemed that Emily didn't have very good answers to that question, though John was hardly an unbiased judge. In one of her first messages to Rachel about White, she wrote, "I'm hardly going to do anything with the guy. It's just flirting, and it's harmless and I've got to admit, fun. God, Rachel, married life can be so repetitive. Teach my students. Cook the meals, wash the dishes, do the laundry, pick up the boys, do the shopping, kiss John, watch some TV, fall asleep, and then get up and do it all over again. When I'm with Matthew, there's that spark, you know. He looks into my eyes, holds my hands, tells me how beautiful I am, and I feel like a girl again. I'm certainly not going to break up my marriage over this. It's just a little bit of excitement." And more recently, she wrote, "Just chill a little, okay? It's just a fling. Probably won't even last a month, and I'm certainly not going to let John find out. I'm being super careful. But I can't even tell you what a turn-on it was when when we petted a little, I was just dripping. Sex with him is going to be amazing, and then it'll be done, and John will have me back, happier than ever and probably hornier too. He's going to love it." John knew he had to get out of there. He didn't want to even see Emily. He needed to deal with the shock and the pain and the anger. He left the computer exactly as he had found it. He wolfed down his sandwich and put everything away, leaving the kitchen the way it had looked before. He ran upstairs, changed back into his business clothes, and left the house. An idea was already brewing, but John knew he needed some time to think it through. He drove straight to the gym and swam laps for an hour. By the time he was showering and getting dressed, he had pretty much worked out what he was going to do. John was a direct, straightforward, goal-oriented person. As a 16-year-old, he decided he wanted more money, and he worked to put together the largest paper route he could handle. In college, Head earned a business degree in only 3 years because he was eager to get out into the world and make a career. And when he met Emily at a friend's birthday party 2 years after graduation, he knew after their first date that he wanted to marry her. He wooed her ardently, energetically, and romantically. He found out that she loved the ballet and got tickets. When he met her mother, he asked her about Emily's favorite flowers and bought them for her. He did, in short, what he always did. He went after what he wanted without dithering. After 8 months, they were practically living together. And when John proposed at La Fontana after a long romantic dinner, she cried and said, "Yes, John," threw her arms around him, and marveled at the ring he slid onto her finger as the people all around them smiled. Was their marriage perfect? Certainly not, but John would have said it was great. Emily was generous and loving. She had a great sense of humor. She was terrific with their boys, and John knew that she loved him. Their sex life had gotten a bit routine, above all because 2 careers and taking care of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old added up to a lot of work. But it was still pretty satisfying. John had absolutely no idea that Emily was feeling restless or frustrated, let alone that she might be slipping into an affair. It pissed him off beyond measure that she was doing it so cold-bloodedly. This was no drunken one-time mistake, something he might have been able to understand. No, this was planned. Some guy was wooing her, leading her on, and she was reveling in it, thinking that some little fling was perfectly acceptable because her life was getting a bit stale. John found himself clenching his teeth thinking about all this. She wanted change? He'd give her change, though it wouldn't be the one she wanted. When he stepped in the door around 6:30, same as usual, John had his plans pretty well worked out. He'd spent 2 hours in the library with his laptop, exchanging messages with Ethan Myers, his friend who worked in IT. Ethan had sent him the file he needed along with detailed instructions on how to use it. John was so furious at Emily that he figured there was no way she'd fail to notice that something was up. Fortunately for his plan, it didn't matter. In fact, that was part of the plan for Emily to get the uneasy feeling that something was bothering John, something he wasn't ready to talk about. So when he found her in the kitchen and gave her a kiss, he let his eyes avoid hers. He pulled away from her hug a little faster than usual. He went off to say hello to the boys a little more abruptly. At dinner, he let himself seem a bit distant, troubled. Emily noticed all this and he could see it confused her. When the boys were in bed and they were watching TV in the bedroom, she asked him what was wrong. "Is it something at work? Honey? You seem so distracted tonight." She was concerned but not frightened. He could see that she didn't suspect yet that it had to do with her. He sighed heavily. "I've just got some stuff on my mind, that's all. Some decisions to make about work. Is it that promotion thing still up in the air?" He looked at her seriously, holding the silence a moment too long. "No, it's nothing like that. Nothing with work." Emily slid over to take his hands. "Then what, baby? Don't let it twist you up. Tell me what's going on." She was all love and support, quite sincere, and it infuriated him. He pulled his hands away and said, "I'm not ready to talk about it. Maybe in a few days. I've got to do some thinking first." Emily stared at him. This was so uncharacteristic of her husband that it troubled her. But he could see that she still wasn't frightened. It hadn't occurred to her that he knew about her and that pig, White. "Okay, John," she said finally. "Just don't shut me out. Okay? I love you. Let me help." He grunted non-committally and turned back to the TV, feeling her gaze on him. At about 10:30, Emily went down the hall to check on the boys, and when she returned, she went into the bathroom to get ready for bed. When she emerged, John knew what she had in mind. She was wearing a light blue nightie, John's favorite, and she brushed out her hair and left it down around her shoulders. She looked fantastic. The second reason was simple enough. John was furious. He was hurt and he was angry. He'd given Emily everything: his heart, his devotion, his hard work. 2 fantastic boys they both adored. Did she think that his life was constant excitement? And yet he wasn't cheating around secretly with some bimbo the way she'd been doing with that White. No, that email to Matthew was good news, but not nearly enough to stop from going ahead with what he planned. At 8:15 the next morning, John pulled his car back into the driveway. He'd already let the office know he'd be out for the morning. His plan had been to surprise Emily as she was dressing to go off to meet White, but she'd canceled that meeting. Instead, he found her on the phone, probably to her sister. She turned to him in surprise. "Hi, John. Give me a sec, Jess. John's come back home. How about if I call you later? Okay? Bye." She hung up and came over to John. "Is everything okay? Honey? I didn't expect to see you this morning." John gave her a serious, troubled look. "Just come sit in the living room with me. Okay? I need to talk to you." She sat on the couch and watched him pace, acting uncertain. He saw her worried look. Finally, he sat in a chair across from her. "Emily, I was going to talk to you about this tonight, but I thought about it driving to work, and I just realized there was no reason to wait, no good time to say it. I'm moving out. I think I'm going to be getting a divorce." He watched her. John had never seen a person's mouth hang open like that, as though her jaw muscles didn't work. She stared at him, swallowed hard. "John, why? We love each other. We have a great marriage. Why?" She started to cry. "Why would you do this? Walk out on me, on Oliver and Lucas?" He got up and paced the room, delivering the words he'd been thinking about ever since Sunday. "There's just no spark anymore, Emily. Married life is so damn repetitive. I go to work, I come home, I play with the boys and get them to bed, you and I watch TV, we kiss each other goodnight and go to sleep. Then the next day we do the same thing. I need a little excitement, something new, something that makes me tingle, gets my blood racing. He stopped and looked over at Emily. She had gone utterly pale. He wondered how obvious it was that he was throwing her own words to her sister right back in her face. I've met someone who… No, she shouted, looking desperate. She jumped up. No, please, John, please tell me you're not. She broke down, sobbing. I'm not having an affair, Emily. I wouldn't do that to you. I haven't even kissed her, even touched her yet. And I want not while you and I… He stopped, watched her cry, her whole body shaking, then spoke his final sentences. But I want that spark. I want someone who will want me, make me feel attractive, make me feel like a man again instead of a drudge who's getting old before his time. Listen, he'll be away on a business trip until Friday. I've got a motel room reserved for when I get back. He'll call you and we can find a time to talk. Figure out how we're going to settle things. If you want to speak to a lawyer, that would probably be a good idea. She gazed at him in horror as he pulled out the suitcase from behind the couch. No, John. Please, honey. Can't we? I'm so sorry, Emily. He turned and headed out the door, listening to her sobs of despair behind him. As angry and hurt as he was, he still felt for her. She was in agony, and the part of him that thought serves her right battled with the part that wanted to come back into the house and hold her in his arms, kiss away her tears, and tell her everything would be all right. I enjoyed that, he thought to himself with a kind of grim satisfaction. John sat at his desk, staring out the window, head gone straight to work. The business trip he told Emily about was pure fiction. He just wanted her to have a few days to feel miserable. He asked Grace to come in and explained the situation to her briefly. Emily and I are having, well, a little tension at home, so I'm staying away for a couple of days, and she thinks I'm on a business trip until Thursday night in case she happens to call. Okay? Grace looked troubled. I'm so sorry, John. Anything I can do? He shook his head. Thanks, no, Grace. I hope we're going to get through it. She smiled a little and said, Been there, done that. Thomas and I once split up for almost a month way back before we had the kids. It was pretty grim at the time. Now we look back and joke with each other about it. They chattered a moment more before Grace went back out of the office, and John realized he felt a little better. God knows I'm not the only guy who ever had marriage trouble, he thought to himself. The 3 days passed quickly, to John's surprise. He booked a nice room at the Hilton on Main Street so he could walk to and from his office. He worked late every day, getting back to his room around 9 p.m. for a quick room service dinner. He got a lot accomplished, sketching out his short-term and long-range plans for his new department. He made phone calls and emailed his contacts in London. He consulted with the other Western Europe personnel at Benson and, in general, got his new job off to a good, solid start. He checked his cell phone a couple of times a day, always finding one or more messages from Emily, and he deleted them without even bothering to listen. He did the same with her emails after glancing through them to make sure there weren't any problems with his sons. John was lonely, of course. He missed Emily as angry as he was, and he missed the boys like crazy. He even considered parking down the street from his house to get a glimpse of them, then decided he could wait until Friday. But the business trip gave him a taste of what a divorce might actually mean, and he didn't like it one bit. Of course, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to scare Emily shitless, really put the fear of God in her, and see if that was sufficient to get her head back on straight and put their marriage back together. If not, he'd deal with that when he had to. With a degree of self-restraint that made him proud, John waited all the way until Thursday afternoon to check Emily's secret email account. He wanted to see what she'd been up to, but he also didn't want to torment himself constantly. When he looked, he found nothing to or from Rachel. Obviously, she and Emily had been talking on the phone, but there were 6 messages since Tuesday morning from that pig White. Why had she changed her mind? What had happened to the magic they'd been sharing? What had he done wrong? Why was she mad at him? Clearly, the pig had known how close he was to getting Emily in bed, and it was just killing him to be denied now. John smiled to himself. Emily had ignored the first 4 messages. In response to the 5th one, sent on Wednesday, she simply wrote back, Matthew, let it go. I'm not going to see you again. Stop contacting me. Matthew had written her once more but half-heartedly, along the lines of okay, but keep me in mind. He knew he'd lost, at least for now, and John thought I've won, at least for now. But for how long? That was the question. What was to prevent this from happening again? On Friday around 11 a.m., John called Emily from his cell. He tried to strike a tone that was businesslike without being too brusque. "Hi, Emily. It's me. How are the boys?" "John, my God." He heard her starting to sniffle. "How are you? I've missed you so much." "And the boys," she started to cry. "I'm getting on the plane in a few minutes. Okay? They'll be home for dinner tonight. I was wondering if your parents could maybe take the boys on Sunday, keep them overnight for a visit, and you and I could have some time to talk." He could hear her pulling herself together. I'm sure they'd love that. They'll call them today and set it up." "Honey, what would you like for dinner tonight?" "I would like to make us something really special." John grinned. "Oh, I don't care, Emily. Don't go to any trouble. Make something that Oliver and Lucas like, hot dogs, whatever." "Okay, honey." She was obviously disappointed. What was she expecting? That head fall right back into her arms. John shook his head. "Got to go. See you tonight. Bye." He hung up, not waiting for the "I love you" that was sure to follow. John's return was fantastic. The boys were all over him, wild with excitement, and he let them wrestle him and clutch at him and tell him all their stories of the past few days. They were thrilled with the Brookhaven Cardinals hats. He bought them and ran to get their baseball gloves so they could have a catch in the backyard. Emily watched all this with obvious sadness. He let her hug him when he arrived but pulled away far sooner than she wanted, and her eyes followed him despairingly as he threw himself back into the lives of their sons. Maybe Shed hoped that his shocking announcement had only been a mirage, that things would go back to normal, but it clearly wasn't happening. John let Oliver and Lucas stay up ridiculously late, almost until 11, partly to prolong Emily's obvious misery, but mostly because he just missed them. It wasn't until they could hardly keep their eyes open that he agreed with Emily that it was time to get them into bed. Once they'd had the last story and the last glass of water, he wasted no time in getting ready for bed himself. Before Emily could attempt either a seduction or a conversation, John already had his head on the pillow and the light out. She still tried, though. "Honey, could we talk for a few minutes?" John smiled to himself in the dark. "Tomorrow, okay? This was an exhausting trip, and the boys wore me out tonight. Are your folks taking them tomorrow?" "Yes, I said I would drive them over around 11. "Okay then, sleep well." He offered her no kiss, no hug. Now that he was home again, the anger that had died down a bit during his busy week at work was roaring through him. It took him a long time to fall asleep, and as he lay there, he was aware of Emily tossing and turning as well. Sunday breakfast was subdued, though you couldn't have told it by Oliver and Lucas, who were jumping around with extra energy. Dad was back, and they were going to Grandma and Grandpa's for an overnight visit. "Can we take our baseball gloves and our new hats? Will Grandpa play baseball with us?" Etc., etc. John quietly enjoyed Emily's mournful looks, and when she was ready to drive off with the boys, he just said, "Well, talk when you get back." But the house was empty when Emily returned, and she had a miserable hour of sitting at the kitchen table, looking out at the driveway and imagining the worst before John returned. He walked in with an armload of U-Haul boxes, and she burst into tears. John handed her a napkin. "Come on, Emily, it's all right. Let's just talk this through like two adults." But he had to wait nearly 5 minutes until her sobbing subsided and another 5 while she washed her face and repaired her makeup. When she came back, she looked better, still devastated, but in John's eyes oddly beautiful. He really was crazy about her. The stupid bitch, he thought. She got them cups of coffee and sat back down at the table. "Can I talk first, John?" He nodded. She leaned forward and looked at him imploringly. "I don't want a divorce. I don't want a separation. I want you, and I want our marriage back. I love you, and I know you love me, John, and you adore the boys. We should be together, and I'll do anything I can to make our marriage better. Anything. Just tell me where to start." He gazed at her, keeping his face neutral. "The excitement's gone, Emily. Don't tell me you don't feel it too, all the routine, the dishes and the boys and the bills. Can you tell me honestly that you haven't noticed? That you haven't been tempted to find something else? Something a little more exciting? Something or someone that would put a little spark back in your life. The moment of truth. He wondered if she'd burst into tears again or run out of the room or even look straight into his face and lie to him. Instead, she said, "Yes, I felt it, John, and I've been an absolute idiot, and I'm afraid when you hear about it, you'll just walk out the door and he'll never see you again." She was trembling and squeezing the fingers of her left hand with her right so hard he was afraid she'd break them. But she didn't stop looking at him. With a straight face, he said, "What are you talking about?" Stiffly, she got up, went to the cabinet above the refrigerator, and pulled out 3 pieces of paper. "I just couldn't bear telling you about this, so I wrote it all down. They'll go into the bedroom and give you all the time you need, but John, will you promise me, please, if only for all the years we've been together, will you promise me that you'll come talk to me about this before you decide what you're going to do?" He looked into her frightened, tear-stained face. "Okay," he said. He took the papers and went into the living room to read them, hearing her crying behind him as she went down the hall toward their bedroom. There was little in her letter that he didn't already know or had pretty much guessed. She'd met White at the seminar, and had singled her out and flirted with her discreetly. Then had gotten her email address and invited her out for what would appear to be an innocent business lunch. Emily had been flattered, and had smoothly worked on her over a period of weeks. At some early point, had suggested she set up a private email account, just so no one will misunderstand their relationship. She appeared to be telling the whole truth. As far as John could tell, there had been 4 occasions when she and White went beyond acceptable behavior for a man and a woman married to other people. The first of those had been a long, sloppy kiss in the parking lot behind a lunch net where they'd had coffee together. After that, there were 3 make-out sessions in White's car parked in a little woodsy lane near a local golf course, where had gotten a little further each time. Christ, it was like high school all over again, John thought. The second time, Matthew had gotten her bra unhooked and his hands on her tits. The third time, she'd taken her blouse and bra off completely. In between the letter's desperate apologies and the affirmations of her love for John, Emily had been pretty hard on herself. "I was a complete fool" was the least of her self-condemnations. She freely admitted having been naive about White's attention at first, and then denying to herself how serious and wrong her behavior had been. "I just lied to myself, John," she wrote at the end. "I pushed all thoughts of my marriage vows, my responsibility to you and the boys, out of my mind. I acted as though this was nothing more than a little bit of flirting with a friend at a party. I am more ashamed than I can possibly put into words. And when you told me you were thinking about divorce, it all hit me in the head suddenly how selfish, how childish I had been to think that my desire for a little excitement entitled me to screw around behind your back. I didn't screw him, please believe me, but I won't lie to you and say it wouldn't have ever happened. It's what Matthew was after, and it would have happened if you walking out hadn't put an end to the whole thing. I'm done with him forever, absolutely, no matter what. I never want to see that smooth-talking prick again. Even if you never forgive me, even if you divorce me, I'm just so very, very sorry that I didn't get my head out of my ass soon enough to see what I was doing to us. And I can't help wondering whether things would be different if I would put more energy into our marriage, into making things more interesting and exciting, instead of that stupid flirtation with Matthew, whether you might still want to be married to me instead of looking for another woman to give you that spark. I am so very sorry. Can you ever forgive me? Can you give me the chance to make this up to you? Your foolish, loving wife, Emily. John sat for a while, gazing out at the backyard before he went into the bedroom. Emily was asleep, curled up in the fetal position under the bedspread. He stood watching her for a few minutes, then found a wave of exhaustion washing over him. He took off his clothes, lay down next to her in his boxers and t-shirt, and was asleep within moments. Sometime later, he had no idea how long, he came awake feeling Emily's warmth against him. As his eyes opened, he realized she was naked, squirming against him, kissing his neck, looking desperately into his face. When she saw him looking at her, she started to cry, holding on to him tightly. "Please, please," she said. "Please love me. Please, John, whatever happens, whatever you're gonna do, just hold me and love me." She pulled his t-shirt up and kissed his chest. John's response could be summarized by the words, "What the hell?" He didn't know what was ahead. Once again, he refused. She held on to him and cried each time he moved as if to disengage himself. She clung to him tightly. Finally, he said, "I need the bathroom, Emily," and she released him. When he returned, he sat up against the headboard, gazing at her unhappy, uncertain face. "How can I ever trust you again?" She lowered her head, nodding. "I mean, this wasn't a drunken fling, a one-night indiscretion. This was a flirtation, an affair over several weeks, planned meetings, emails back and forth. When can we meet? When will hubby be out of the way?" "Pretty cold-blooded, Emily." "I know," she said, not looking up. "It's really terrible what I did. I have no excuse." Then she said, "I didn't have sex with him, though. I mean, actual sex." Angrily, John said, "But you were going to, right? Until I screwed up your plans?" Again she nodded, and he could see tears on her face again. "So how can I ever trust you? How can I live with you after this without wondering when the next sleazy asshole will come along and work his fingers into your panties?" She sat up straight, brightening. "You mean you're thinking about it, John? There might be some chance we could." She looked hopeful and very nervous. "I don't know. There's once burned, twice shy, right? I mean, you put your hand on a hot stove and burn the shit out of it. Maybe you've learned your lesson. But there's also once a cheater, always a cheater. How do I know that if I find some way to get past this, some way to get over your stabbing me in the back, that you won't do it again in a couple of years, once the dust has settled, once everything's back to normal and life starts getting a little dull again?" Suddenly, he wanted to be out of there. He didn't want to talk anymore. He jumped up and started putting on his clothes. When Emily began to speak, he put up his hand. "No more, Emily. Okay? Not now. I'm going out. Make some dinner or call me, and I'll pick up some takeout. We can talk then." And he left the bedroom. God knows why, the second, third, and fourth balls he hit at the range were pure, perfect drives, nearly 250 yards right down the middle. The next 50 he pretty much sprayed all over the place, but he worked up a sweat, and the hour spent not thinking about his marriage was a relief. The relief ended on the drive back home, even though he took the long way out around the park, enjoying the bright sunshine and the sight of all the joggers and bikers taking advantage of the day. What to do now? His questions to Emily had not been rhetorical. Had done what Head set out to do. His preemptive strike had put an end to her sleazy affair with that prick and put the fear of God into her. Now that seemed as though it was the easy part. How did they put their marriage back together? Emily had made paella with shrimp and chorizo sausage, one of John's favorite meals. They ate it in near silence, with her examining his face anxiously for clues as to his mood. When they cleared the plates, he said, "Let's go sit on the deck, Emily." She brought out 2 cups of coffee, and they sat at the little table. "Okay," he said, watching her wary eyes. "Last night was good, I think." Emily looked surprised for a moment, then her face softened, and she nodded. "Yes, I think so too." They both stopped and laughed. John said, "I have some things to say, but you can go first." Emily said, "The reason I think it was good is because it hurt me so much. So much. I mean, there you were with this huge promotion, this exciting new job, and probably lots more money. And I didn't know anything about it. You'd kept this huge secret from me, and I—" She looked right into his eyes. "I felt so excluded and so betrayed, and I was so angry. And then you told me exactly when you found out, and of course I understood why you hadn't told me, and all this time I thought you only learned about my affair when I told you in the letter. I had no idea you'd found it out on your own. My God, John, I am so sorry for that." She sighed. "So that took the wind right out of my sails. But when I thought about it later, I realized what a good lesson it was for me. For weeks, I've been feeling so terrible about what I did, about how badly I've hurt you, and terrified you're going to leave me. And this is the first time I just felt hurt myself. How could you do that to me? And then I realized, well, Emily, maybe for the first time, you're getting a little tiny taste of how John has been feeling all this time, betrayed, left out, kept in the dark. Except the secret I kept from you was 1,000 times worse." She stopped, looking down. He could see the tears on her cheeks. "So I figured anything that hurts me that way, that lets me be in your shoes a little bit, is probably good for me. I've been feeling so guilty and frightened I haven't spent enough time actually thinking about how you must be feeling." She laughed sadly. "After last night, that problem is gone." John waited, but Emily was done talking. He said, "Yeah, I think so too. That's one of 2 reasons last night was good. But the other, strangely enough, is that it was the first time in more than 2 months you've stopped cringing around me. You were furious. You really let me have it. And guess what? I realized I missed it. They smiled at each other, both amused. I wanted you submissive for a while. I wanted you feeling guilty and ashamed and terrified I was about to walk out the door. But it's starting to get old, you know? Obsequious Emily is not the woman I married. She's not the woman I love. And I realize that while you keep wanting me to trust you again, you haven't been trusting me not to leave. You don't trust that I love you and am trying to give you another chance. He was getting a little agitated now, and he took a breath. Why should I trust you after what you did when you want trust me? So you need to do that, Emily. You need to start being yourself and remember how long I've loved you. He paused again. Maybe you were being a doormat because you thought I was insisting on it, but I'm done with that. The month I promised you has stretched to 7 weeks, and I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm sleeping in bed with you every night, and I'm not seeing anyone else. He watched her thinking about it, and then she nodded her head. Okay, she said. I'll work on that. They spent the rest of their evening apart. At 10:20, John was suddenly so exhausted he couldn't hold his head up, so he undressed, brushed, and went to sleep. Sometime later, he felt Emily slide into bed behind him. She kissed the back of his neck, then snuggled up to spoon him. Nothing particularly dramatic happened after that, nothing sudden, but things got better. He noticed after about a week that he felt warmer towards Emily, that their conversations were easier and a little less stilted. One night, when he forgot to stop for the dry cleaning, he said, "Head pick up." She snapped at him for being thoughtless, then stopped, looking at him a little worried. Then she shrugged her shoulders and went back to her cooking. He said, "You're right, Emily. Sorry. They'll get it tomorrow. Promise." He watched her look back at him with a little half-smile. "Okay," she said, and they let it drop. The next morning, Emily was in the kitchen when John walked in. "I did it today," she said quietly. Her back was to him, facing the stove. Had just come home from work. He knew right away what she meant. They'd discussed it and planned it a few days ago, how Emily was going to contact White's wife in case she didn't already know what a cheating asshole she was married to. "How did it go?" he asked. She came and gave him a quick kiss, looking tired and a little pale. "Not as bad as I was afraid it would be." When I explained why I was calling, there was this long silence, and then she said, "Actually, this isn't the first time I've heard this story. Turns out Matthew's been pulling this on her for years. She's caught him twice before." So I apologized again and got her email address and forwarded all our messages to her in case she needs them for evidence. She said after the last time, she told him and absolutely promised her parents that if it ever happened again, he was gone. I think she was going to call a locksmith right away so he wouldn't even be able to get into the house at the end of the day. He gave her a slight smile. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Emily sighed a little and put her arms around him and her head on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, John. I know I've said it a million times, but right now I'm feeling sorry for her too. And for what I did. 3 kids and married to that selfish pig and about to be a divorced single mom, and what I did didn't help any. Honestly, Emily, and I'm not even trying to make you feel better, but if he hadn't gone after you, it would have been somebody else. The guy is a lowlife piece of shit. I can feel sad for his wife and kids too, but White has it coming. They were doing better. They were almost there, but he couldn't let it go. Not quite. And then, a few days before Halloween, John came into the office and found Grace weeping quietly at her desk. "Grace, what's wrong?" She looked up, embarrassed. "It's nothing. It's just Kevin." She started to weep again. Kevin was Grace's son. He was 24. John took her hand gently and said, "Come on, Grace. Let's go into my office." He settled her down on his couch and closed the door. "Is he all right? Is he hurt?" She shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's Hannah, his fiancée. She broke up with him." John sat with Grace for a while, listening quietly, patting her hand, and the story came out. Kevin and Hannah were only 3 months away from their wedding, and he cheated on her. He and his friends got really drunk on a trip to Miami Beach, and he had a one-night stand with a girl he picked up in a bar. Hannah heard about it through mutual friends, and she broke off the engagement, returned Kevin's ring, and wouldn't speak to him. Grace said, Kevin knows he screwed up, John. He's beside himself. He's apologized. He's told her he would do anything to make it up to her. Promised he'd never cheat again so long as he lives. He asked about counseling, but she's just so hurt, so angry. And it breaks my heart. Not just because Kevin's my son, but because they were so good together. They really made each other happy. It's just such a waste, you know? A great relationship thrown away because of one really dumb mistake. They talked about it for a while, and Grace eventually started to feel a little better. She gave John a half smile. Thanks for listening to me, John. I'm sorry to get so emotional. Don't be silly, Grace. I would be upset too. I'm sorry for Kevin. Maybe after some time has passed, Hannah will give him another chance. Grace went off to the ladies' room to wash her face, and John finally sat down to work. But the story kept popping back up in his mind all day, and not surprisingly, it made him think about himself and Emily. On the drive home, he asked himself the big question, the one head wrestled with over and over again back in the summer. Was he better off with Emily or without her? And the answer was pretty obvious. Did he want to be a divorced guy seeing his boys a couple of times a week at best, living in some apartment, trying the whole dating scene again? No. Did he think Emily would ever cheat on him again? Well, nothing in this life is ever a sure thing, but probably not. Had she owned up to her stupidity and done everything she could to make it up to him? Yes. Did he still love her, and did their family life make him happy? That was the easiest one of all, yes. He called Emily from the car. Hi, Emily. Listen, do you think you could get a sitter on short notice? I would like to take you out to dinner tonight. No, nothing special is going on. I just want some time with my wife. Yeah, okay, I'll be home in 20 minutes. You can tell me then. Thanks. Bye. John was full. He loved the veal scallopini at Bianchi's, and Emily was a little bit tipsy. She'd had most of their bottle of wine since John was driving. He paid the sitter, watched until she got her car started and drove away, then locked the front door and turned off the outside lights. Emily was waiting for him by the stairs, smiling, but he said, "Come into the kitchen with me, Emily. I would like another half glass of wine." She'd been wary at first during dinner, wondering if something serious was on John's mind, but they'd had a nice time, and now she was feeling relaxed, relieved, and happy. They sat, and John told her about Grace's son and his broken engagement. He reached across the table and took Emily's hand. I've been thinking about it all day. Such an unhappy ending. Such a waste of what sounds like it was a great relationship. I don't want the unhappy ending, Emily. But I want this to be over, okay? You and me, it's time to decide once and for all. She looked confused. What do you mean, John? I mean, he said, I love you with all my heart, but I cannot live every day of my life looking over my shoulder, thinking if my wife is cheating. I cannot live with the fact that you had a thought in your mind to give away your body to another man. In all the years of us being married, I never thought of loving or sharing a bed with any woman other than my wife, but you not only thought about it but actually went along with the plan until I found out. I will never know if today you are sorry that you actually were about to make a mistake or sorry that I caught you. Yes, you never had sex with him, but you spent tender and loving moments with a man who is not your husband. That makes me feel like an inadequate man who cannot make his wife happy. In the last few weeks, you have been a wonderful wife. You have done everything to try and win me back, but I cannot find the person I married. I wanted to scare you and try to win you back, but I forgot that I am your husband, and I should not be fighting for your love and faith. A marriage is like a house walls of love and a foundation of respect and trust. For you, I have lost both the latter. If we decide to stay together, there may be days in the future where we wake up and fight, and all of a sudden, I might throw your indiscretion right in your face. That would be painful for us both. I don't want to hold on to your painful memories, so let me leave with the good ones. So tonight, my love, let's have this dinner and let me walk out of the house and your life. I have filed for divorce, and you will be served in the coming week. We'll share custody of the kids and try to be good parents to them. Let's not expose the kids to our bitterness and hate. All this while she was crying, but I knew deep down she understood and realized that I could not move on from what she had done. A few months later, we were divorced. There was no animosity and no fights. We discussed the separation of assets and were fair to each other. The kids were growing, and our own lives were growing apart and away from each other. I did keep a respectful relationship with my ex-wife. Never did I say anything bad or hateful. She never married or dated anyone. Neither did Inat that we were competing, but I did it because I had no faith left in love. I never asked her why she never dated. 15 years later, Emily passed away from cancer. I was there at her funeral. I did visit her in the hospital one time. She handed me a letter that day and had specifically asked me not to open it as long as she was still breathing. That evening, I was at home and opened the letter. She did not write a lot, but all it said was, "All these years, I lived with the hope that one day we will be back together. It did not happen in this lifetime. If I get another chance to be born, I would want to be your faithful wife. I love you. Yours forever, Emily." A tear rolled down my eye, and I mumbled to myself, "I love you, Emily, my lost love." Thanks for watching. How would you handle discovering your spouse's affair? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.